Get your burps out now.
Apples make me burp.
Okay, now.
Oh, what?
Yes!
Hey.
I was like, come on, we're nerds.
It's gotta work.
Can't get the tech going? Come on. Hello, ladies.
Huzzah! Hi.
Hello.
I like your shirt.
Yeah, well, I was trying to figure out what to wear, and I thought we'd go Taoist up on this.
That's
Yeah,
nice.
perfect.
Yin yang.
That is very cool.
I tried to check some of your podcasts, and I realized we have many of the same shirts. Chewy is my co-pilot. I was going to wear that one. Couldn't wear that.
Yeah. I've recycled a few. Like, I've got my Hogwarts University shirt today. I know I've worn that a few times.
Excellent.
Yeah. We should probably, I don't know if we could sit back a little. I don't know. How does it,
Oh, I can get.
it's actually probably a better picture for us. Yeah. So, all right. Well, so we've tested. Oh, so just so that you know, from a technical standpoint, we are also getting very sensitive about our mohawk, but
I like that. That's fabulous.
thanks. So I'm also recording using our regular camera, which has a 29-minute limit. So I might get up, start and stop it to just do that, so that I kind of want to have like two different record. Although I don't know how much it's going to matter because this looks great. So anyway.
That's cool. It's good to have a backup anyway.
Just in case.
Yeah, we've been dealing with that 29-minute issue on the road on the book tour.
Yeah.
So we have to keep switching it out. And then I found out, do you know why it is? We Googled it. It's tariff.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't really understand that, but just
because if it's a video camera, it has a higher tariff. And a camera apparently has, I don't know.
Why? It just doesn't make any sense.
So we'll deal with it. That's cool.
Yeah, it's all arbitrary, I suppose. So where are you in the world?
Right now, I'm in the Hudson Valley, which is about an hour and a half north of New York.
Nice. Excellent. What's the weather like out there?
It's really nice, although I'm noticing from my face that there are clouds that are across as it gets dark and light. It's not bad though. It's starting. Fall is hitting, right? Yeah. So it's starting to get a little cooler. And I was in Santa Fe all last week, where it was, oh my God, so hot. And
yeah,
so hot.
And do you get any breeze at least?
No, but I mean, it was nice. It's gorgeous there. It's gorgeous. But
sure.
It's hot. So this is good.
It's a dry heat, which is a different beast.
Yeah, better for the hair, but not so good for like the whole rest of the body.
It's harsh levels. Yeah, I was in Montana last week, and it didn't occur to me that Montana would be so arid, but I mean, I was like, my face was sunken in. And I'm like, I'm trying so hard to hydrate. I just felt like a raisin.
Well, we made it. This is good. Thank you guys for letting us shift the date a little bit when
no problem. It works out.
Cool.
So we had a few okay, so I suppose that this is like partially just a regular fun discussion, but then also we have questions for you. So can we ask you some questions?
Of course.
Great.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we were wondering if you could tell our viewers what it means to be a multi-faith minister.
That's a good place to start. So I also like to call it being a free agent, which means that I pick and choose from a lot of different traditions, and I'm also the member of a lot of different spiritual communities. So I'm not able to choose just one. So I have multi. So tactically, that's kind of interesting because you need to kind of figure out time-wise how you're going to be everywhere at once. right?
Right.
So it necessitates a little bit of choosing. But I think at the core of multi-faith is this word called interspirituality that you guys might have read in the book.
Yes.
Right? So it's this idea that there's some similarities underneath the traditions.
Mhm.
So I find a lot of communities where I feel the same. I feel the same, even though we're doing different rituals or different practices or words or songs or that kind of stuff.
And that, I find that interesting, because one of the things that I really, okay, so let me back up. When I first started reading your book, I got a couple pages in, and like there were some words that you were using that I was like, oh shit, man, oh God and stuff. You know, so I was really hesitant, and I found that was a lot of what I worked through on my own when reading your book, was like, why is it that every time I think of God and something that was like Christianity based, I like felt this like legitimate like push against my body, and I'm like pushing back. And so that was one thing that I was working through on my own as I was getting through your book. And then, but the thing that I enjoyed, that allowed me to sort of like release and cool my jets a little bit, was your point about just take little pieces to make what you like the things that you enjoy, and put it together. Like, why do I have to stay in this box of Buddhism, Taoism, Christianity? Like, how about, you know, like all the things that I love about Judaism, and there are some things that I like about Christianity.
And we're already living the lifestyle anyway without even realizing it too.
It's true. You know, I like think about when you go to the grocery store, right? You're not in one aisle.
Right.
Or if you are, you've got some really interesting health issues perhaps, but unless you're in the produce aisle, right? But
Right.
Well, that's the thing. It's almost like you're suggesting like a spiritual salad. I mean,
it is. And some of the critique, right, of those of us who are choosing from multiple paths is that we are choosing like the spiritual smorgasbord, and that we're not going deep anywhere. And so the challenge is, if you're choosing from multiple places, right, are you getting a deepness, or are you just kind of skipping along the top, right? So that's the challenge when you're doing a lot of different pieces. You know, sometimes I get the critique too of, hey, you're just a commitment phobe. You know, what's wrong with digging down into one tradition? I have no problem with people digging into one tradition. I have friends who can spend amazing amounts of time on a meditation cushion. It's fabulous. I envy them. That's awesome. It works for them. I can't sit quite as long. I may need to go out and do my meditation while I'm hiking, right? But we're still trying to get to the same place, right? So that's the idea of, you know, what vehicle are we using to get there? We're still trying to get to the same place, because the root of the word religion and the root of the word yoga both mean the same thing, right? They mean to bind, to connect. So at its basis, right, there's a search for purpose and for meaning, and for, you know, how do I make sense of my virtues and my values, and, you know, how I live in the world, right? And there's some of that stuff that's similar among the traditions, and there's some stuff that's different because we live in different cultures.
Exactly.
Right? We live in different cultures, so the expression looks different. Just like our hair looks different, and our teeth look different, and our body color looks different, because we're in different cultures.
Right.
Yeah, and we did so our last episode that we posted a couple weeks ago was on cultural appropriation or misappropriation. And so that's something that, when talking about religions and belief systems, that's something that I try to take into consideration, because there's a lot of history behind a lot of these things that I may not have a proper understanding of, because of, I mean, being born and raised in the United States, like we're the teenagers of the countries of our planet, you know, and so, you know, trying to have an understanding of Buddhism, or even Christianity, which maybe we feel like we have a concept, like maybe we feel like we understand here in the United States because it's ubiquitous. But I think there's that depth of understanding of where something came from, like the history behind how Christianity came about, the history behind Judaism and Islam, is sometimes something that I struggle with because, you know, I've got friends from the Middle East, and like there are just things that are just baked into them, like into their, not even, I mean, more than just their like physical genetics, but like their I don't know, spiritual or cultural genetics.
So you just unpacked, there's a whole bunch in there, right? You just popped up a whole bunch of different topics. And I think that when it comes to cultural appropriation, I think that we have to look at when we use that term and in what context we're using it, right?
Right.
Because we've gotten to a place where we've said all cultural appropriation is bad. We're using it as a negative term. Now, sociologists will not use it as a negative term. Cultural appropriation can also be the way that cultures merge and that cultures change, right? But our context since the 70s or so, I suppose, right, has been that cultural appropriation bad. So does that equal doing something from another culture or engaging in something with people from that culture is necessarily cultural appropriation? So for me, it goes back to if I'm saying, I want to learn how to better sit on my cushion with the Buddhists, and I go visit, I do a little sacred space crashing, and I go hang out with the Buddhists, it's not cultural appropriation, right? I'm going to the source of what it is to learn more about it. And then I'm coming home and I'm doing a practice on my cushion that I'm trying to connect, and I'm doing it in the way that I'm taught. Now, if I turn around after one lesson, right, with my Buddhist friends, hang a shingle outside my door and say, hey, meditation lessons.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so there's a shift, right? So there's a spectrum on this cultural appropriation. What I'm talking about in Spiritual Rebel is trying to get better awareness of other cultures, of other religions. Where do we see the sameness or the similarness, right? Because everything's not the same, but we have similar things. We have contemplative prayer, which is very similar to meditation, you know, things like that. And if we learn a little bit more about each other, we demystify some of the stuff that we've inherited about these religions that may not be true, which takes me to your second point, Christianity, right? There's 9,000 denominations of Christianity in the US.
Yeah.
Christianity here looks very different than Christianity in Africa. Christianity is not a thing, but we talk about it as it's this thing called Christianity.
Right.
It's amorphous and it's varied, and there are people who have widely different beliefs within Christianity, not only of what God is or does or looks like, but values, you know, we see that playing out. And there's that much diversity in all the traditions.
Yeah.
Sometimes we talk about, like, I have pushback from some pieces of Christianity too. And then I have other pieces where I'm like, come here, I want more of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's more, I think, about people and our individual interpretations of the religion than it is about the religion.
Right.
So there's a lot in there. So it's buyer beware, right? It's what is your intent? If you're a seeker, what's your intent? And are you trying to be part of, or are you trying to take?
Right.
Trying to take, that's where we get back into cultural appropriation again, right? I'm taking this from that culture as opposed to I'm trying to share it, right? And hopefully I'm doing that in a way where I'm engaging people from that culture, because I'll learn more.
Yeah.
I'll learn better, right?
Even within the world of social work, so I'm a social worker, and they're kind of changing the language from cultural competency to cultural humility when working with any other demographic. So I had a really good example that's similar to this. So I'm a straight white lady, but I work with a lot of LGBTQ folks, and I was having a conversation with somebody about being a good ally and wanting to stay in my lane when I'm working with people. And the feedback I got was that, similar to intention, it's all about the intention that you have for the other person, and it's all about being authentic too. So if I sit around and I'm worrying like, oh, I can't, engage with this client because they're somewhere in that LGBTQ spectrum and I'm a straight white lady, I shouldn't, help them with their problems, then I'm missing the entire point. I can be humble about the fact that I don't have that experience and still engage with them as another human being. And
that's right. With curiosity too.
Curiosity too.
Right.
That's okay to even ask questions if I don't understand something because I'm coming from a different place.
That's right. And I think it's also not making sure that we're not setting ourselves up as experts on things we're not expert in.
Right. Right. Exactly.
That's a big piece of it. That's a big piece of it. You know, when I was writing the book, one of the things I kept saying is, okay, here, I'll give you a little bit of information on this thing. And then if you really want to hear about it from the experts, go here, here, and here, right? Because it necessitates when I'm multi-faith that I'm not a Zen master.
Right.
Right. So I need to point you towards the Zen masters, give you a little piece of it. And then if you want to learn more, go learn it from the Zen masters. Right. Yeah.
Right.
But, you know, it's interesting. I got in this big debate with someone the other day about when we talk about, okay, I'm flipping over to Star Wars, right? So this idea of canon and appropriation and copyright law and all of that, right? And it kind of relates a little bit where you say,
Very much so.
there's this thing that was created, right? And is that owned by the people who created it? Or are the people who are inspired by it who are now doing things? Like, for example, the shirt could be copyright law, copyright infringement that I'm wearing, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know what the exact rules on R2D2 and BB-8 are, right? But you know, you have something that inspires people, that is useful to them in their lives, is helpful, right? We're exploring that monomyth and the hero's journey through this way. Who owns what?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and then we saw a lot of that with like Last Jedi, which I am wearing a Last Jedi shirt, which I'm not exactly proud of, but that's the thing. It's like when, you know, the fans feel like, I mean, we own it, you know, I mean, I know that there's like copyright and there are some legal aspects, but I mean, I own Star Wars, damn it, and Rian Johnson from Star Wars.
This is the same thing that happens in religion. So flop it back, right? Where you have people who are doing something on a daily basis that's super meaningful. And you may have some people in, you know, it's hard to run organizations. We don't do it perfect. I've been in some, you know, I've been a good manager, I've been a bad manager. We have the same thing in religions. We have people who are doing a great job. We have other people, I don't know, maybe a little questionable, right? Where their development path is, I don't know. But you know, we've got that same thing where the people are saying, you know, this is about us, right? Or is this about the hierarchy? And that's where we get in the struggles. Right. That's where we get in the struggles. And it's the same thing that we get into with our franchises, right? And then we stretch them, right? And the people start to say, we want to go here. Right. And then the hierarchy has to decide, you know, do we let them go there? What's the process? And this is just people stuff. So it's just in religions. You know, we see it everywhere.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I think goes to the point also that, like, I mean, religions were created by people.
That's right.
To make sense of things. I mean, that's really all any of this boils down to, is that we all want to connect.
We want
to feel like we belong, and we all want to feel like we have our tribe or our people that are like us, that think like us, and can maybe help explain the things that we don't understand. And that's how we get all these offshoots of religions, and even, you know.
Yeah, it is. It is. And at their core, you know, they are good intentioned.
Mm-hmm.
At the core, we're good intentioned, but then things happen. And then I think one of the challenges is we figure out, okay, so what do we do when my edges of my beliefs rub up against yours, right? So how do we take responsibility for our piece in that? For example, you talked about the G word, right? I had a lot of baggage with the word God.
Mm-hmm.
I had mixed this, you know, I kind of want to get a time machine and go back and just knock out a couple of those Renaissance painters.
Right.
Because before that, we didn't have that, right? We didn't have this white anthropomorphic God with a big finger coming down, right? So we take that, and as a kid, I put a piece of Darth Vader on that, you know, and like Voldemort, all these things, right? Like, this is this punishing guy. And whenever anyone else says God, that's what they mean.
Right.
And then when I started to dig into it, I realized that's not what everybody means.
Right.
And some people, when they say God, are talking about what I think of when I think of Tao or energy or spirit or this or that or the other. So we have to take responsibility, I think, to dig into the biases that we're walking around with, or when you feel that big pushback, right? You feel it. And I love listening to you guys' first podcast on the book, because you'd be like, I got pushback here and I've got pushback here. And I'm like, yeah, me too. That's why I'm digging into it, right?
Right.
Like where that pushback means I've hit an edge. I've hit a comfort edge.
Don't.
Hold there, pause.
Okay. Okay. We leave all that in too. I don't really like editing as much as that's supposed to be my job. I don't really like to.
Well, that goes to realness and authenticity, right?
Yes.
That
Yeah.
we're not polishing ourselves. We're three white nerds with brown hair and glasses. This is interesting. Talking about meaning in life.
Very diverse group right
Well,
here.
and I think that's one of the things that I appreciated about your book and that I appreciate about you, and that's what I enjoy about our little podcast here, is that, the point of it all, the point of being a rebel, at least for me, is, and it's funny, being a rebel to me is being exactly who I am, is being authentic.
Same.
And so it's like, but why is that rebellious? That's being who I'm already at. I'm not going against who I am.
Right.
I'm
Being
going
yourself is rebelling. Yeah.
Right.
I think it's rebellious in the sense that we receive a lot of messages about who we should be.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a way, for me, the rebel piece was the pushback of this message you're giving me doesn't feel authentic.
Yeah.
Right. So, I grew up in the 80s in the Midwest with a lot of questions about my sexuality that weren't being answered in my church, right? And about my mental state and about how much I like to drink, and all sorts of other things, genetics for addiction. We didn't talk about this stuff, right? So I was given a lot of messages, and my rebellion at first was a blue mohawk and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I like to say, punk rock and 40 ounces and Camel cigarettes, right, in the 80s. But the rebellion at first was, I don't want any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I went so far out that I was so far atheist and so far, I don't want anything to do with this, and religion sucks, and, keep that stuff away from me. So then there was another shift where the rebellion came of, all right, that's not working. I'm hollow.
Yeah.
I'm hollow. I'm drowning in addiction. I'm drowning in working. I don't have good relationships with people. I don't have community. I'm alone in the chat room on AOL.
Yeah.
Right? $400 a month on AOL trying to make friends.
Yeah.
And then you go back and you say, all right, so maybe there's something in there for me. And so becoming a minister was like the biggest act of rebellion for me. Because, I was a really rebellious preacher's kid. And one of the women, when I was on the book tour, who was in my dad's church, my dad has passed. He passed when he was 65. But she said to me, your dad came up one day when you were about 13, came up into the pulpit, shook his head, went, teenagers, and then started a sermon. And there you go. And so I was that kid.
Yeah.
So I think rebellion to come back and be a minister in a different way, different than my dad was, but still honors what he did, right? How do we honor each other when we're doing things different? So rebel doesn't have to be unruly, or it doesn't have to be angry.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be divisive. Does that land anywhere? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because what I've found in my personal rebellion is that I'm actually being more kind to myself.
Yeah.
And I find myself softening, and I find that the more authentic I can be, the more myself I can be, the less defensive I am.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because I can't, but last week I was in Montana and couldn't be myself entirely. I was out of my element, and I felt myself being extremely, extremely defensive. And I ended up, like, the person I was with was like, you kind of have an attitude right now. And I'm like, well, I've never been told that I have an attitude at all, ever. And so, like, I sat back with that and I was like, yeah, I am being defensive because I can't be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I recognized it and I could start being myself again, then, and going against that sort of attitude that I had created. Like it creates this kindness in myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like it releases a burden of whatever the hell I think I should be.
Self-compassion.
Yeah, and I think that's where practice comes in too. Because I know that for the first 30 so years of my life, I thought that religion and spirituality was about belief. Right, the message I had gotten is it was about belief.
Yeah, almost like blind belief too.
Yeah, blind faith.
Yeah, or even valid faith. I just that it was about the thoughts. It was about what I believed in, so that I could be part of a community or kicked out of a community. Right.
Right.
Even though my father's church was wide open and amazing, but I got these messages. We take in stuff from all different places. And then when I got into seminary, in this group of like crazy, awesome, unique people from all these different paths, there are 90 of us in the room, and not one of us is a copy of the other, right? And there's so much diversity sitting in there. And we start talking about, if we start comparing or trying to connect on the belief piece, it can get messy real fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right? With I say this and you say that, and but if we connect in the practice piece, right, where we're all meditating and feeling something together, or we're doing kirtan together, or we're doing a service project together, doing some seva, or we're visiting a church together, or we're doing something like that, and we're having an experience of connection, of love, of trust, of all those things that we're looking for, that's a different thing. And so that's kind of where I gravitated to, so that creates this foundation. When I'm in a place where I start to get attitude or I start to feel really uncomfortable, can I be like, all right, I got to go to my room for a little while, and there's some spiritual practice that may help me get back, to my stasis. Because the only way I knew how to get to my stasis before was uppers and downers.
Yeah, I was gonna say like drinking.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm stressed, so I'm going to have a glass of wine to take the edge off.
Right.
Or I can't get going, so well, let's not go there on the podcast, but right, there's plenty of other things, right? So I was trying to medicate those things, my moods and my states. That's where yoga is so brilliant.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's so much about that, about how are these practices to moderate what's going on in our mind, what's happening in our body, our spirit, whatever language we're using.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what was that process like for you of going to this interfaith? So it's an interfaith seminary that you.
Yeah. It's called One Spirit Interfaith. Yeah, One Spirit Interfaith Interspiritual Seminary in New York. It's really a super funny story. So I finished my first book, which was based on my dad's stuff. It was my process of him dying. I get 1,500 sermons, right? Because we don't get millions when preachers die. So I got 1,500 sermons. And I was going through this process of like, what do I believe and what don't I? And I can't ask my dad questions. So I'm taking all these classes in Christianity and in Judaism and trying to sort all this stuff out. And then, of course, I stumble into the so-called Eastern stuff, as if Christianity came from the US, which it did, right? It came from the East too. But so-called Eastern religions. And I was at a yoga studio in a class on the Bhagavad Gita. And the guy who was teaching, it's late. And I'm talking with this woman, and she's like, what's your story? And we're sharing, blah, blah, blah. And she said, what's next? And I said, well, I saw this little ad for this interfaith seminary, and I think like I want to go learn with people because my husband's tired of hearing, what I've learned. When I rush home, I'm like, would you believe this? And he's like, yeah, go find your people, right? Yeah. So like, I think my people might be here. And she said, what's it called? And I'm like, oh, it's this tiny little small school, full of weirdos like me. And she's like, no, what's it called? And I'm like, you wouldn't know it. And in my memory of it, she has this big booming voice, and she says, what's the name of the school? And I say it, and she says, I'm on the staff. So I scream out, because we're like 2 hours north of the school, I scream out, no shit. And which is appropriate in, one of my fancy spiritual words. And
Yes.
And then I had lunch with her, or breakfast one day. I wanted to know a little more. I said, what's this like? Like, what do you do there? And she says, we learn about the religions. We do practice together. We dig into biases. We learn about working with other people. We learn about how to handle conflict between religions. I'm like, okay, that's of interest because of what's going on in the world today.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, and it's your personal experience. So we're not going to tell you a set of beliefs you have to believe in. You're gonna figure that out. And I don't know, I was just kind of hooked. I was like, that sounds cool. Like, go hang out with a bunch of other people and do like what you and I, what the three of us are doing right now, right? Is sorting through meaning and purpose. And so I signed up, and 2 weeks later, I was having that experience of being like a 13-year-old again, where you're in class and you're like, nobody here likes you. Friends. And that guy's weird. And I wish she'd stop raising her hand and answer, you know, and so all this stuff flooded me. The unresolved stuff from elementary school and junior high. So then, you know, I had the pleasure of working through that too. But what I like about it is I actually teach there now. I liked it so much I didn't want to leave. So I stuck around doing some service and volunteering, and I now am on part of the academic staff. And what I love is just watching a group of people in a 2-year program fall in love with each other, even though they're very, very different. And if we can learn to help more people in the world do that, right? And note, I didn't say convert anyone to such and such belief or make anyone join such and such community, but if we can all learn to be curious about each other and fall in love with each other in that kind of agape sense, right?
Yeah.
Just like we may do in a yoga studio. You know, your work is in a different space, right? I have friends who are healers or therapists, and their work is in that space. And we just have to find out where our piece is. And I think this is my piece. And I get a remarkable amount of people who want to talk about the force. Isn't that awesome? Right? That we can go there, that we can take things that are meaningful to us and overlay them onto these sacred traditions that are thousands of years old and find the same thing. How cool.
Well, you know, and that for me, you know, the concept of the Jedi, it does seem like an interfaith thing anyway, because Lucas pulled from so many, well, maybe not so many, but several belief systems in order to sort of kludge together this concept of the Jedi. And so for me, that is kind of like, yeah, there's a little bit of, I can see the Buddhist monk thing in that. I can see the definite like Japanese Shinto thing. I can see a lot of that. And then the concept of the force to me, like, I think the language of it all is what allows me to accept it or brings me into it, because I get that.
We don't have the baggage on it. We don't have the baggage on that in the same way. And so what was really interesting for me when I got sober, because I'm a 12-stepper, right? And you get into 12-step rooms and all of a sudden, you know, it says God, 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 God everywhere. And I was like, yeah, I can't go there. And so I can now, couldn't then, right? And so, you know, for me, it was like, I had all these other words I had to use. For a while, I used that which makes trees. For a while, I used the force, right? In the book, I actually collected, in the back, there's 200 different names.
Yeah.
That I collected as we started to talk about this thing. But the thing that was interesting about the force is the force has, like the Tao, right? There's some agency to it. There's a piece of like, I have some responsibility,
right,
in how I'm using my energy, my actions, and an acknowledgement in a Taoist or in a Zoroastrian way. You know, there's a piece of that in there too, of it can be used this way and it can be used this way. And where am I with that? And I think that's really useful to us right now. Right? Is like your actions matter. And how do you use that? And I think that idea of the force is, it's just so touchable. It's so tangible in so many ways. And I had this, okay, big segue. I have a Jeep, and the back on the tire is a huge picture that my husband painted of, it's a portrait kind of merging me and Princess Leia.
Oh my God. Cool.
And my license plate says FORCBWU. Okay. So I'm driving along, and it's bright white. It looks like a stormtrooper driving down the road. And so I'm driving along, and people will pull up next to me and be honking and give me the thumbs up. And, you know, I see we've connected over something.
Yeah.
And one day this guy, but I forget that's on the back of my car. And one day this guy pulls up next to me in this car that looks nothing like mine. He's in a real big truck. He's got a gun rack on the back. You know, we would be having very different meals, right? We're not eating the same thing. We probably don't have the same beliefs. You know, who knows? But from the outward appearance, we look very, very different. And he pulls up, and he's got some bumper stickers that compete with some bumper stickers I might have on my car, right? And I'm like, what is this guy doing in this lane? What, he pass me or don't pass me? Or I'm getting, that kind of road thing going on. And then I look over and he's trying to get my attention and he's waving and he's giving me the thumbs up, and he's going, may the force be with you. Right?
That's awesome.
And there was a moment where I thought, wow, okay, nice judgy of this guy, Sarah. Right? Nice judging of all of his stuff and how different he is from you. And is there that space that we can connect in that, may the force be with you? Yeah. There's a lot to go. There's a lot of places to go with that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's because it's not technically connected with any traditional religion or other belief system necessarily. That's for me why like Star Wars is so important, and I get so pissed off when somebody screws with it. And I don't mean like Rian Johnson, but I mean like when people become assholes about Rose and Jar Jar and and the actors themselves, to the point where these poor actors are no longer on social media. Like,
right.
Like you've just screwed up my religion, folks. Like,
right.
Stop being assholes.
Well, this is the debate that happens within all of our belief systems, right? And even the atheists, because atheism is a belief system, right? So, this is what happens. This is what we do to each other. This is what we do to each other. And we do it more and more now because we can do it so easily on a swipe of this or words on this. And our words matter, and we're hurting each other.
Yeah.
We're hurting each other. And so I think that means there's a space for coming back to, because once you get into like Star Wars or, my friends who are Potterheads, right, who get into the Harry Potter, whichever modern myth you're into, or whether it's Marvel or whatever, that then you go back and you read the Dhammapada, which is the sayings of the Buddha. You read the Tao Te Ching, right? You go back, read the Torah, read it with that view back into our traditions. They're a little more open. They're a little wider. Go read the James. Go read all this stuff, and then maybe we can become. We can deepen. We can deepen what we're seeing that we love in the Force and we love in the Jedis, and how can we? I always call myself aspiring Jedi because I haven't signed up with any of the like official groups yet. Well, I did, but I haven't done all the coursework and all that, right? That's what happens, right? We have a belief and then we create a thing and then we've got the coursework and then you have to pass or not pass and all that. So I always say I'm aspiring Jedi. And I think that includes all of this stuff, right? Because everything that Lucas pulled and everything that he pulled from Campbell and everything that he pulled from all the other folks. And then here we are.
Right.
Right? Because you guys have combined two things that I love dearly, and now we get to connect.
Yeah. I think it's, you said, you commented on, go back and read it. And I was just thinking in my head, like, I would love to actually have like the Torah or any of these books be read by like Ewan McGregor or by James Earl Jones, like
right?
Literally hear it in a different voice.
Oh, the Bible would be great by James Earl Jones.
So what's funny about that is that when I started, right as I was getting into seminary and I started reading all these texts, I was hiking to them on audiobook. So I was getting all these different voices, and I had not started doing the Star Wars books yet, right? So my intro to audiobook is the Dhammapada, which is how I ended up with, Arabesh on my arm, right? Which I talk about in the book. But then I started to listen to some of the Star Wars books with the like highly dramatized, like, it's like I'm watching a movie.
Yeah.
But I'm not watching it. And I kept thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great if I'm like reading the Dhammapada and all of a sudden you hear pew, 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 or you hear Chewie like in the background do something, that would, maybe there's a space for that. Maybe at some point when we all have a lot of extra time on our hands, we will do that and grab, who is it, Matthew Bordelin, who did the Dharma of Star Wars. Maybe we'll grab him and some other folks. And,
I love that book.
Yeah.
I'm actually rereading. He has He has an updated version of that book now. I don't know if you know that, but
I don't have the updated version.
yeah, he incorporated whatever movies had happened in between and rewrote it. So
that's cool. Yeah, I use that in one of the resources in Spiritual Rebel.
Yes.
I quote from him in there because I like what we do when we do that, when we layer things on top of each other. But yeah, so there are some audiobooks of the Bible, not James Earl Jones that I know of, but someone's got to go Google that because
yeah.
But I do hear voices when I listen to some of these things where I'm like, oh, I know who that actor is or this actress.
Right.
Kind of a modern voice, but sometimes hearing it is much different than how we read it as a kid.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Right? And we also I didn't read the Bible right as a kid, like at all. I had the stripped down little kid version.
Yeah.
Any of the subtlety or the nuance. I mean, there's some amazing stories in there.
Yeah.
Right. There's also some stuff we use to, throw at each other and cause great harm.
Yeah.
But if we can read it with adult eyes, with a critical eye, and with some scholarship and with some discussion with each other, there's some gorgeous stuff in there.
It's true.
Right.
Yeah.
And with a mindset that this was written in a different time as well, just thinking about the time frame of the writing.
Yeah, you have to, and the culture, right? So we look at like historical criticism, and it's fascinating to find out like that's why I'm, my nerdiness went from like one place to like all of a sudden I got like scripture nerdy, right? Because I wanted to know, like, I don't like this sentence. What's this about?
Right.
Let me go dig in. Or I love this sentence. What's that about? And when you start to dig in, oh, this meant this at this time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's divorced, right? From all the culture of however many thousand years ago. And then you go, oh, that makes sense.
One of my one book that I really appreciate is, I don't know if you've read it. It's called The Red Tent.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden her name fell out of my head. Diamante. I can't remember her first name, Judith or something. But I love those kind of stories that takes Dina from the Old Testament and actually like fleshes out what her life really would have been like. And it changes how you read the Old Testament and different parts of the Bible, because you're like, yeah, they're actually real humans, and there's cloth and there's perfume and there's food. And it changes things to actually humanize it instead of just words and like somebody's childish kind of, pared down version of a story.
Yeah, it does, because and it's something interesting. Like I started to learn a lot of stuff. Like one of the things that I learned, because I grew up using that kind of New Testament, Old Testament kind of thing too. And then all of a sudden I got into, a member of a Jewish community now too, because I love chanting with, it's a fabulous community in New York. And then, someone said to me, let me tell you how it feels to me when you say Old Testament. Because this is a book to me, right? This is like, and we started to get into this debate about like the prequels and Star Wars, and because it always goes there, right? About like these are better than those, is better than this, and so I learned like, okay, so what am I supposed to call it? And then that gets a little confusing. Like, do we call it the Hebrew Bible? Do we call it the Tanakh? Do we call it the Torah? But you start to dig in and learn from other people who say, this is a book that's really meaningful to me. And I was like, oh, so I want to learn more about it. And you start to hear those stories, or you start to learn like Jonah and the whale is a fabulous story. And it's not what I learned as a kid. It's just not, right? And so when we dig in and we talk to each other, like I'm sure if you and I sat and talked to yoga, then you guys could be like, okay, Sarah, there's like 3 things you're wrong about here. And let's revisit that, and let's go here. And isn't that fabulous? Or in this story or that story. So I think as we keep talking to each other, then we learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. Just in general, for sure.
I feel like everybody should go to the Interfaith Seminary. All of us.
I do too. That would be fabulous. That would also be good job security. But, so we had one girl. I'll keep this kind of anonymous, but we had one of the people when I went through, who was from was Roma, and she was we had a presenter who said something about, and didn't say it with any intent of harm or anything like that, and said, and there I was in my gypsy skirt. And
yeah.
my fellow student got, I could just see that she was just getting antsy in her seat and getting a little red. And I was like, kind of, what's going on here? What's going on here? Because I didn't really know what was going on here. And then she stood up at the Q&A and she said, let me tell you how that sounds to me. Let me tell you how the term gypsy has been used. And let me provide you an alternate term. And of course, now I'm her advocate, because anytime I hear someone say gypsy, I've got to, to share what I've learned.
Yeah.
But I guess that goes back to another piece of what did you say? Cultural humility.
Mm-hmm. That's a great term.
Yeah.
Cultural sensitivity. How can we learn from each other those different things? Because we don't mean to. I really don't think we mean to for the most part. We have no idea. And you say something, and then all of a sudden somebody gets bristled, and we need to know. There are people listening to this podcast right now who are triggered about something any of us have said, right? And that's okay. That's your experience. And so, so we can have a conversation about that too. But, look at where are we triggered, and what does that mean? And what's our shadow, and what's our piece, like you guys were saying, what's our piece, and where might we need a little more knowledge? And then the next thing you've got 500 books on your shelf, and belong to 7 spiritual communities, and you're teaching in a seminary. I don't know, these things happen.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So I had a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Which was how you got into yoga.
You do that. I'm going to start.
Who called you?
Oh, she's going to restart.
Research. Oh, I have never heard that word. Reinsert?
Restart.
Oh, I thought you said resert.
Oh. Okay, go ahead.
So let's see. Gosh, it was about about 20 years ago I started. So I was in a really bad car accident, and I had a lot of back pain, so a lot of actual pain, but then I also had a lot of anxiety as a result, and I was having a hard time navigating, what would that have been, like 1999, and having, mental health issues, because even though that wasn't that long ago, there still weren't quite as many resources. There wasn't as much understanding of how normal anxiety is and how normal it is for even people to have panic attacks. So I did some research on more alternative methods, was more the term at the time, and I stumbled onto some different, it started with mudras. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I started reading about mudras and their different meanings and things that I could use to focus. And then I started to dig a little deeper and get into like, oh, asana, that's a thing. Okay, so maybe I'll try that. And I kept digging and digging and digging. And the more I dug, the more I realized it wasn't about, my spine feeling better. It was about being able to not make the anxiety disappear or go away, but being able to sit with it and being able to notice it and then allowing it to pass. So that was kind of my experience, and it just kind of never stopped. And I think, so 2008, I finally was like, I need to teach other people how to use this. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, I'm going to get rich, because you can't get rich being a yoga teacher. Spoiler alert. Yeah. I thought I need to teach other people. And I didn't know that social work was going to be on my path yet. This was kind of like my way of getting in there, was like thinking, I know there are people out there struggling with anxiety, depression, all these things that are so unbelievably normal. And here's this amazing component that people aren't talking about in this context. And this was like the point, was to be able to sit with things, not to, even back in 2008 or 2001, it was like, get a yoga body, or get, what was it, like yoga booty or something like that. There was like a thing about getting yoga booty. It was like, no, I don't, none of that. I don't care what.
I have some pushback from the term yoga booty.
No, that's not what this is about. This is about the fact that we all have the strength to feel better, and the components of yoga help us, I guess, accept where we're at right now, and then learn from it, and have the ability to like dig in and see things like, where is my pushback coming from? Where am I pushing myself that I don't need to be? And then just continuing from there. Yeah. So it kind of ended up getting me into social work, honestly, because I realized I was teaching in like residential treatment settings and for all these different things. And I thought, this is not, like, yoga is great, but there's more here. So that's kind of where I'm at now, is like merging the two.
I love that, because it talks about that kind of thing where, okay, there's a problem, right? There was discomfort.
Yeah.
You were looking for relief in some way.
Yeah.
You find something healthy. You dig, deep, expand.
Yeah.
Then you go into service. I mean, that's just beautiful.
And yoga now is, and I say this all the time and I end up sounding like a broken record, but in the context of counseling therapy, it's an evidence-based practice for healing from trauma, specifically healing from trauma, but anxiety, depression, all these things. Like, we now have the things that like the yogis already knew, and even, 15 years ago I already knew. It's like now we have science that's saying, oh yeah.
There's a quote that I read, and I can't remember where I saw it. So if anyone knows it, they've got to email us and tell us. But that says, one day science will be able to prove what religion already knows.
I've seen that too.
Yeah, I read that recently.
I've been thinking about that lately as well. I had a conversation with somebody. I'm going to get trained to be able to do EMDR in October. So I'm in desensitization reprocessing. And I was kind of talking about how on paper, in theory, it sounds kind of woo-woo and it sounds kind of witchy and it sounds kind of magical, but we have science behind it. And my friend, who is very witchy, in fact, said, that's kind of how everything works. She's like, witches and pagans and all these other people and yogis have known these things forever. Now we just have the right words for things that.
Well, and science is our ability to document.
Yes.
things that are happening.
Right.
Right? It's our ability to document things that we experience in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess that's like the one pitfall of being a social worker, is that I have to be able to say things are documented before I can use them. But it's just lucky that science is catching up to some of it.
It's awesome. I think what they're finding with meditation, what they're finding with Kriya Yoga, prayer, all of these things. Newberg, Andrew Newberg, who I quote in the book, his yawning practice and stuff like that. What they're able to document now to say that, this isn't just woo-woo. But even if it was woo-woo and it made us better people and our bodies felt better, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. I think did we do an episode about that?
We did.
Sort of?
Yeah.
I got to listen to that one.
I don't remember what the context was.
I don't either. I don't know if it was the full episode necessarily.
It was about placebo.
Yeah, because it's like, I mean, not only if it works, who cares, but at the same time, it's like, my conflict sometimes is, and as I've gotten further into, the years of being a yoga teacher and then recognizing people are effing listening to what I'm saying.
I know, that's still so wild to me. I'm like, why are you listening to me?
Yeah. So like, I feel like I have this heavier responsibility now to make sure that what I'm saying actually isn't woo-woo and is more science-based. But then I feel like I'm so sciencey that I'm like, well, God damn it. Now I don't have any like sensitivity and, now I kind of miss the woo-woo because I'm so like, there's research behind it.
That's been my pitfall too.
The balance. It's the balance.
It's saying like this, there's no science for this, but you might find benefit from it.
Yeah.
Like being okay with that. That's kind of where I'm at as I'm trying to balance it, because I fell into that too. I'm like, everything has to be evidence-based.
And I feel like a lot of people probably just don't care because at the end of the day, they just want to feel good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like stomping all over it with my research.
And
well, but you know what? You guys, I've listened to a number of your podcasts, and I'm now a huge fan. And and all the book tours, when people are like, "Which podcast do you like?" I'm like, "Yoga Rebels." But I think what I love about what you have is you have a humility about knowledge, right, and about what you're doing. But you have great compassion in those two together, and then you're seeking knowledge.
yeah.
Right? You're doing it really responsibly. And when we talk about, using these traditions that didn't originate on this soil here, right? And how to use them responsibly, I think you're good examples of that, of how you find something that's meaningful and solved a problem, and then you go and you share it with other people. It's beautiful. And then you do it with humor and snark and fun and all that, which is,
Authenticity.
authenticity, which is a good side of it, right? Yeah. But there's a saying in 12-step about this idea of authority, or that, we have to be these perfect teachers and blah, 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 which is that as long as you know a little more than the person that you're working with, you're of benefit and you're of help to them.
Right.
So I always say to my students, I'm not a Zen master. I'm not a rabbi, right? I'm a generalist in a number of areas that has an ability to see where the connections are and to help you connect those things, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to profess that I'm a perfect one of each one of these. I just know how to send you to the places that you need to go. And so I think as teachers or as instructors or healers, a lot of our work is to be able to know where the resources are and to be able to know where to send people when something, works for them.
Right.
How do you go and do it and be able to send them off? And it was interesting when I was working on the book where, each one of there's like 21 days of practices in it, right? And each one of them has like instructions on how to do it and then a bunch of resources. Mm-hmm. Some of the pre-readers said to me, why do you want to send them out of your book? And I was like, because it's not about, this is like, this is the travel guide, right? This is the guide that you read to start to look at what's out there in the world and flip through it and then go into these different places. But it's not about keeping, like you said earlier, keeping in my lane in a way. If I want to keep all of you in my lane, that's selfish.
Yeah, right. And the other aspect of that too is we can have all the information in the world about a thing, but we are never the expert on anyone else.
Right. That's
Every
right.
person is the expert on themselves. So all we can do is give people tools and information and resources, and then it's up to them to do with it what they will. So you could have given, only one or two things to read or watch or listen to at the end of the chapter, or you could have given 50. It's up to the individual. You can't control what they're going to take from all of this or not take from it.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's why when I went through seminary, what was so amazing is like each month we were that religion, right? Like we tried it on.
I love that.
That's cool.
So, yeah, which was really cool because there were things that, like I remember the month that we were studying Islam and I'm like, wait, okay, and I got to choose. I got to choose from a big list of things and I had resources and information and all sorts of stuff to look at. And I was like, I'm going to try that 5 times a day praying thing because I don't like to pray. And let's see what happens if I try that. Right?
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, it gave me so much respect for finding meditation rooms in airports.
I bet.
Because now I know when I'm in an airport and I'm stressed out because I learned while I was doing that, when it hits a certain time of the day and you need to do the prayer, where do you go? And how do we accommodate people? And how do we accommodate people's different beliefs? Having freedom of religion, freedom from religion, but also being sensitive that religion is part of our culture for many of us, right? Mm-hmm. And so I found these different things, or, here's this Buddhist prayer that's, gorgeous to say before I eat, or whatever. So each month, I just kept picking up all these different things and just trying them on. And again, not trying them on for commercial benefit, not trying them on to take them from someone, not trying them on to say I'm an expert in it.
Right.
Trying them on to say, can I touch a piece of the experience that other people are having? And I did, and it was very addictive.
I was just about to say that I don't think I would ever stop, and it would become an ongoing thing, and I wouldn't be able to choose just one thing at a time.
I don't want to have to stop because there's so much. But like I said, I'm an addict. But these are good things. These things are good things to be chasing, and they're good things to be learning new people. Because if I'm only curious, our world can get very same. Everybody can be very similar in our world very fast. Take a look at your Facebook feed, right? Every once in a while I look at mine and be like, oh.
Take a look at this.
This, right? But not to shame that or blame that we're 3 really, really cool people who look a little alike and like the same things. Right? That's okay. But if we stay here, if we stay here and we don't branch out, and we don't, when I was picking schools for doing my master's, I wanted to pick one where, I was a minority, right? Because I wanted to have that experience.
Yeah, good for you.
So
hard.
It's so cool. It's so cool to be, that was one of the things you guys mentioned too in the other podcast about the idea of going into other spaces.
Yeah.
And I remember one of you mentioning, I'm not sure why they would want me there. That kind of comment. Which is a totally valid question, right?
Yeah. I think I was talking about AA. I believe it was because that was part of my training for getting my master's in social work, was that they really wanted us to become familiar with AA, and they wanted us to attend a meeting. And we kind of rationalized that, like, I don't have to say anything when I go, but I thought, like, what right do I have to be there if I'm not actively an addict? And just
well, which is a good question, right? And so in AA we have open meetings that anybody's allowed to come to.
Right, and anonymous.
As long as you're going into the open meeting and not the closed meeting. But also, I love that there's a social worker or a minister or a massage therapist or somebody who comes to an open AA meeting, because that means you don't think that I suck and that I'm a sinner and that I'm right. You want to learn more about my process. So yeah, come on in and learn about, what this is like. Yeah. That was my experience when I went to other religious institutions and things like that too. I had one experience. I was at a hotel for a conference, and I'm checking in next to these guys who were like just dressed to the nines, like suspenders and spats and the whole thing, right? And I can't help it because I just, I'm like this. And I'm like, what are you here for, right? What is this all about? And they told me they were part of there was a church that was having a conference at the hotel too. And I was like, oh, that's great. Like, I'm a seminary student. I'm learning about things. I got to go write my sermon, blah, 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 blah. But tell me about what you do. Like, what's your thing, right? So we have this conversation for about 10 minutes. Then we go into our rooms, and I'm sitting down to do my homework, and I hear knock, knock, knock on the door, and I open it up, and he's like, church starts at 8. We're in ballroom A. And now I'm like, oh, wait, do I want to go that far in? Like, I don't know. And all I have are like ripped jeans and t-shirts, and you guys are, the hats and all this kind of stuff. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to be the only white girl in that place. And, what's that about? And are they going to want me? And are they going to point at me? And what's it going to be like? Right. And so I went, right, because I wanted to figure that out. And I was very nervous, and it was awesome. And I stayed for a couple hours. And the next day, it was kind of funny because people kept coming up to me and saying, how'd you like the service last night? And my first thought was like, how'd you know I was there? And I really was like, duh, Sarah, right? And a little adorable boy came up to me. He must have been 4 or 5, and he just walked up to me and he said, praise the Lord, lady. And that would have been triggering language for me a long time ago.
Oh, sure.
Right? That would have been triggering. And I was just so filled with joy of having experienced this wonderful musical extravaganza with this great group of people, using some words that were comfortable to me, some that weren't.
Yeah.
Wondering while I was in there, well, how would you guys feel if I stood up and yelled, hey, I'm bisexual? I don't know what your stance is on that, right?
Yeah.
All of these things kind of ruminating in me, right? But what I left with was understanding all the ways that we could be similar and all the things that we could share, that I could focus on those. If we differ on some of the things that are legal issues or cultural issues, there's a way to do that, and a way for me to advocate for what's important to me. But that I felt welcomed. Did I feel welcomed by everybody? I don't know, but I felt welcomed by the people sitting next to me. Dance a lot better than I could. Much better hats than I did. And I had so much love for them. I had so much love for a new group of people. So I think that it's scary to go into new groups. We're not sure if they want us. But if we go in with curiosity of, I'm here to learn about you because I don't know anything about you, and I want to learn about you. I found that most people are very welcoming.
Yeah. And I think that goes beyond just religion, talking about the LGBTQ community. Before we started recording, we were talking about transgender community and the, drag queens and all sorts of things. And it's like, if you don't know, and if you truly want to like have a little bit better understanding, then there has to be that open communication and that willingness to be vulnerable. I was re-embracing Brene Brown over this past week.
Always.
Yes. And, just that, it is kind of frightening to say, I'm not like you, but I'd like to know something about you. And is that okay? And there's a vulnerability on both sides.
Yeah.
To be the person that's being observed, or the group of people that's being observed, to allow yourself to be authentic in front of a newcomer or whatever. But but that's important. I mean, I think just in general, that's where we've gone so far away from that. I can only speak for, my community and my United States and all of that. Can't speak for the rest of the world, but I kind of see that that's what's happened. And I think we need to do more of that.
Yeah.
Being vulnerable.
And I think we also somehow get a message that in order to be part of a community, or in order to be in a community, we have to agree with everything that everyone in that community agrees with.
Yeah.
And this comes up a lot where people will say to me, well, you're condoning such and such a behavior by being there. And, and I have kind of a different view of that. I'm going to learn where you are and what you're about so that we can have a conversation about it. And if we're not in dialogue about this, then nothing happens, right? We just keep staying on either side of our fence and tossing shit at each other, right? But there's a curiosity, and there's also an agreement that even the people who are members of that community don't always agree with each other. Right? There's wide diversity. There's wide diversity. Not everybody who comes to one of your yoga classes is going to agree with everybody, right?
Oh.
Or in one of my seminary classes, and that's okay. But when we say, like, we don't believe the same thing, so I can't be in dialogue with you, I just can't do that.
Well, it doesn't even make any sense, because even if you take it down to like the micro level, because we're talking about like big organizations and gatherings, but if you just take it down to like a one-on-one relationship, I mean, Lauren and I don't agree on everything.
Yes, we do.
except that you agree that you agree on everything.
Yeah. But right. But that's the thing. It's like, people that I'm closest with, I like to say, like, we have a majority of things in common, but we have enough things not in common to make it interesting. Because as phenomenal as I think that I am, I truly don't want to be around just copies of Berg all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Wouldn't life be boring?
Yes.
And we'd end up killing ourselves too. But I do. I think even, I've noticed we have a lot in common, and I'm sure that we could, if we kept going at a certain point, we would find something that we are fiercely on the opposite sides of.
Right.
And could go at that too. But if we don't stay in that conversation with each other, then we do that whole otherizing thing, right?
Yeah.
So I really learned so much going into these communities. And I remembered at one point I went into a museum for a spiritual tradition at one point that I didn't know anything about and I had a lot of bias against. And I kind of walked in and I'm like, all right, I'm here. Tell me, what do you got going on? Like, what do you got going on? And she's like, would you like to hear Jesus speak? And I was like, hell yeah, I'd like to hear Jesus speak. Let's go hear Jesus speak. And there was like a big Jesus, sculpture, right? So I'm having this like, what's going on? Can I do this? And I just decided I'm going to set all this aside and I'm going to treat this like as if I'm like at Galaxy's Edge or something, right? Like this is I'm just here to observe and see what's going on. And I watched a bunch of movies and I had a conversation with her and I looked at her exhibits and the whole thing, and they didn't have a gift shop and I was really disappointed. I said, hold on a second, because I'm a spiritual consumer, right? How can you not have a gift shop? And she went and she came back and she brought me one of their sacred books. And she had highlighted some things for me. And she handed it to me and she just started to cry. And she said, thank you for letting me share my tradition with you.
Aww.
And I said, thank you for sharing it with me. And, and there was just this moment where I was able to soften around some of the ideas I had about what they were about. I'm not in a place where I would agree 100%. I don't think I'm in a place where I agree 100% with anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
But I was able to soften and to have a little more knowledge about, what it was. And then also to be able to be, like you were talking about earlier, to be an ally. If somebody's bashing, I hate it when people bash religions.
Yeah.
Because it's, we bash something as if it's, back again to this idea of not allowing that there's diversity within a tradition, and we just, we bash it. Or we say, I don't like organized religion, yet we're in an organized meditation center, So, it helps me be a better ally too. Of, if you want to know about those people, go visit them. They don't have a gift shop, but you can go learn a little bit about that. Like, I totally want to come take one of your guys' classes too, now that we're connected. So that'll be on my list. I will sacred space crash you guys next time.
Yes. Do it.
Well, we've had you for over an hour now, so I want to respect your time. Thank you so much
That's
for,
the book for everybody.
So get this book because it's awesome. We've talked about this also. I mean, it's interactive. You're doing stuff. That's a fantastic.
Yeah, the idea is that you're reading 10 or 15 minutes in the morning, right? And then there's a practice and you go out and you try that out. We're also doing a workshop. So in January, there's a workshop that's going to be online and in person at the seminary that I teach for. So if people are interested in that, it's January, I think it's 26th. The information is at spiritual-rebel.com. And I will say that I will go ahead and there's a form on there. Like I'm doing like a giveaway. So if anyone who's listening to this wants to go there and get a giveaway to get a free class, that too. And there's also a giveaway on the site for a free book, free stickers, swag, right? Spiritual swag. So spiritual-rebel.com.
Cool. Excellent.
And you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for finding me. I'm so excited that you exist.
That's how we feel about you.
That you guys are doing what you're doing, and that you're with joy and levity and yet deepness. And I'm just a huge fan of the podcast, and we'll keep sending people over to you guys.
Cool. Thank you. Excellent. Well, what we always say.
Oh God, keep
the rebellion alive.
Indeed, and may the force be with you.
Yes, may the force be with you always. All right. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye.